Imagine stepping back in time to the year 1825. Today is the 23rd of April, just as it is for you. But the world is a very different place. Our king is George IV, and the town you are standing in is a tangle of narrow, winding streets. The ground beneath your feet is not smooth tarmac, but bumpy cobblestones, slick with rain and mud. The air is thick with the smell of coal smoke billowing from countless chimneys and the unmistakable scent of horses. There are no cars, no buses, only the clatter of iron-shod hooves and the rumble of wooden wagon wheels. It's a noisy, bustling, and often messy world. The buildings lean against one another, their timber frames and brick fronts darkened by soot. Shop signs swing in the breeze, advertising everything from bread and boots to candles and cloth. You might see a butcher's shop with its wares hanging openly, or a blacksmith's forge, where the clang of hammer on anvil rings out all day long. People hurry along the pavements, the women in long skirts and bonnets, the men in sturdy trousers and caps. Life moves at the pace of a horse's walk, and everything you need for your daily life is likely made right here in the town or brought in by a slow-moving wagon. In 1825, the town is on the cusp of great change, but it doesn't know it yet. Most people live their lives in much the same way their parents and grandparents did. Your world is small. You know your neighbors, the shopkeepers, and the local vicar. News from London or other big cities arrives slowly, carried by mail coach, and is often days or even weeks old. The rhythm of life is dictated by the rising and setting of the sun, the changing of the seasons and the chiming of the church bells, which mark the hours of the day for everyone, rich or poor. At home, life is simple, but hard work. There is no electricity to light your rooms or power appliances. When darkness falls, the only light comes from flickering candles or smelly oil lamps. Water doesn't flow from a tap. It must be fetched in heavy buckets from the nearest well or parish pump, a chore that has to be done every single day, whatever the weather. Cooking is done over an open fire in the hearth, a task that requires constant attention. Keeping a house clean, warm, and fed is a full-time job in itself, long before anyone even thinks about going out to earn a wage. For most families in our town, work began at a very young age. There was no time for a long childhood. As soon as you were strong enough, you were expected to contribute to the family's income. For many boys, their future lay deep underground in the local coal mine. From the age of 10 or even younger, they would descend into the darkness to work long, grueling shifts. They might be trappers, whose job was simply to open and close ventilation doors, sitting alone in the dark for hours on end. It was dangerous, frightening work, but it was a vital part of the town's economy. For the girls, a different path was often laid out. Many would enter service, becoming maids, scullery workers, or cooks in the houses of the wealthy. A young girl might start as a scullery maid, spending her days scrubbing pots and pans in a cold, damp kitchen. It was hard, physical labor with very long hours, often starting before dawn and finishing late at night. While it offered a roof over your head and regular meals, you had very little freedom. Your life was governed by the strict rules of the household, and you might only get one afternoon off a week, if you were lucky. Not all jobs were in mines or manor houses. The streets themselves were workplaces. A strong man with a good horse and a sturdy wagon could earn a decent living as a carter, transporting goods in and out of the town. This was a skilled job. You had to know how to handle your horse, navigate treacherous roads, and secure your load properly. It was also a dangerous one. Roads were poorly maintained, accidents were common, and the threat of highwaymen was very real on lonely stretches of country lane. The pay was better than many other jobs, but the risks were high. Other people worked in small workshops as blacksmiths, carpenters, weavers, or shoemakers. These were skilled trades, often passed down from father to son. You would spend years as an apprentice, learning every aspect of your craft until you were a master yourself. In the 1820s and 30s, however, this way of life was under threat. New factories with steam-powered machines were beginning to appear, able to produce goods faster and cheaper than any single craftsman could. For many, the choice was becoming stark. Adapt to the new world of machines or risk being left behind. The change from the 1820s to the 1950s was powered by invention. In the countryside around our town, farming had been done with simple wooden plows and hand tools for centuries. But soon, new iron machinery began to arrive. First came horse-drawn seed drills that planted crops in neat, efficient rows. Then, later in the 19th century, the incredible steam-powered traction engine appeared. This metal giant could plow fields and power threshing machines, doing the work of dozens of men and horses. Many farm workers were suspicious. These machines were expensive, noisy, and took away jobs. But their efficiency was undeniable. This reluctance to embrace new technology was a common theme. When the first railways were built, connecting our town to the rest of the country, many people were fearful. They worried the smoke would poison the crops, and the noise would frighten the livestock. But the trains brought goods, post, and people faster than ever before, shrinking the world and changing the town forever. By the early 20th century, the horse and cart that once dominated the streets were slowly being replaced by motor cars, another noisy and expensive invention that many thought would never catch on. The biggest revolution, however, happened inside the home. For over 100 years, housework remained a tiring, manual struggle. But by the 1950s, a new kind of power was transforming daily life: electricity. Suddenly, you could light your home with the flick of a switch. A wireless radio brought news and entertainment directly into your living room. The backbreaking work of wash day, once an all-day chore involving boiling copper pots and mangles, was transformed by the electric washing machine. The icebox was replaced by the refrigerator, keeping food fresh for longer. These new inventions weren't just about convenience. They gave people back their time. A woman in the 1950s, with a vacuum cleaner, an electric cooker, and a washing machine, could get her housework done in a fraction of the time it took her great-grandmother. This freed people up for other things: leisure, hobbies, or even taking on part-time work. The arrival of these gadgets in the home was just as revolutionary as the steam engine had been in the factory a century earlier, changing family life from the inside out. In 1825, school as we know it didn't exist for most children. If you were from a poor family, your education was likely to be brief, if you got one at all. You might attend a dame school, run by a local woman in her own home, where you'd learn the alphabet, and perhaps some basic sums. For most, though, work was seen as far more important than lessons. It wasn't until later in the 19th century, with new laws, that going to school became compulsory for all children. This was a huge change, one that promised a better future for the next generation. A typical Victorian schoolroom was a strict and orderly place. Children sat in long rows of wooden desks, often with inkwells built into them. The teacher stood at the front, a figure of absolute authority. Lessons were focused on the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Pupils would chant their times tables aloud and practice their handwriting by copying phrases from the blackboard onto a slate. Discipline was harsh, and the cane was used for misbehavior or failing to learn your lessons properly. The aim was to create a disciplined, literate workforce for the growing industries. Despite the strictness, school offered a world of opportunity that had been unthinkable for earlier generations. For the first time, a boy from a mining family could learn to read and write well enough to get a job as a clerk in an office, escaping a life of hard labor underground. a girl could hope to become a teacher herself or work in one of the new shops that required literate staff. School was a passport out of the life your parents had known. It gave children aspirations and the tools to achieve them, fundamentally changing the social fabric of the town. By the 1950s, schools were very different places again. The classrooms were brighter and more colorful. While discipline was still important, the approach to learning had changed. The curriculum was broader, including subjects like history, geography, and science. The goal was no longer just to create workers, but to provide a more rounded education. After the Second World War, there was a great sense of optimism, and education was seen as the key to building a better, fairer society. The school was the place where the dreams of a new, modern Britain began. For much of the 19th century, fun was something you made for yourself. With little money and very little free time, leisure was simple and often took place right on your doorstep. Children played games in the street, like hopscotch, skipping, or marbles. On holidays, the whole town might gather for a fair on the common, with coconut shies, simple roundabouts, and stalls selling gingerbread. For adults, the local pub was the center of social life, a place to share a pint of ale, play a game of darts, and catch up on the local gossip after a long day's work. As the years went by and working hours slowly became shorter, new forms of entertainment appeared. The Victorians loved a spectacle. Traveling circuses, magic lantern shows, and music halls became hugely popular. A music hall offered a variety of acts: singers, comedians, acrobats, and magicians, for the price of a cheap ticket. It was loud, cheerful, and a wonderful escape from the grime and hard work of everyday life. For the first time, entertainment was something you could go out and buy, a product just like any other. The greatest change in how people had fun came in the 20th century, with the arrival of the cinema. At first, films were silent, short and flickery, shown in converted halls. But by the 1930s, grand palace-like cinemas had been built in towns all over the country. With the arrival of the talkies, or films with sound, going to the cinema became the nation's favorite pastime. For a few pence, you could be transported to glamorous Hollywood worlds, watch thrilling adventures, or laugh at your favorite comedians. The cinema was warm, comfortable, and magical. By the 1950s, the cinema was at the heart of the town's social life. It was where you went on a date, met your friends on a Saturday morning for the children's matinee, and kept up with the latest fashions from the movie stars. But another new invention was already waiting in the wings: the television. At first, only a few wealthy families had one. But soon, television sets would become more affordable, bringing entertainment right into the living room and changing how people spent their free time once again, just as the cinema had done a generation before. In 1840, a farm laborer might earn around 10 shillings a week. This doesn't sound like much, and honestly, it wasn't. After paying for rent, which could be 2 or 3 shillings, there was very little left. The family's diet would be based on cheap, filling foods like bread, potatoes, and oatmeal. Meat was a rare luxury, perhaps only eaten once a week on a Sunday. Every penny had to be carefully counted. A new pair of boots was a major expense that might have to be saved for over many months. There was no money for extras, and a spell of illness or unemployment could be a disaster for the whole family. A skilled worker, like a wagon driver or a craftsman, could earn more, perhaps up to £1, which was 20 shillings, a week. This extra money made a huge difference. It meant a better diet with more meat and vegetables, the ability to afford coal for the fire, and perhaps even to put a small amount aside in a savings club. However, even for these families, big purchases were almost unthinkable. Buying a bicycle in the 1890s, which might cost around £5, would have meant saving for months or even years. The idea of owning a motorcar was pure fantasy for all but the very rich. By the 1950s, wages and the cost of living had changed dramatically. An average working man might bring home around £8 a week. While prices had also risen, people had more disposable income, money left over after paying for essentials. For the first time, many ordinary families could think about buying things their parents could only have dreamed of. You could buy a new television set for about £70, or a brand new washing machine for a similar price. These were still huge purchases, often bought through hire purchase or paying in installments, but they were within reach. This change in what people could afford transformed the town. Shops were no longer just selling basic necessities, but a growing range of consumer goods. People began to think about home ownership, holidays, and even buying a small family car. A Ford Popular, one of the cheapest cars, cost just under £400 in the mid-1950s. A massive sum, but not an impossible one for a family to save for. Over these 125 years, our town had gone from a place where survival was the main goal to a place where people could begin to choose how to spend their money and enjoy their lives. The historic buildings remained, but the life lived within them was one of greater comfort and possibility.